Morning, Bob. Alcoholic.
Yeah, Bob.
The last 10, 15 years, I've always had a spiritual journey. And my spiritual journey has kind of changed or enlarged in some ways in the last number of years. And when I was young, my spiritual journey had to do with belief. And now my spiritual journey is more about relationship. But one of the things that I miss, Howard, wish you were here for this conversation, is my concept of God has enlarged. It's become universal. In addition to, I still have my Catholic. I think if you're raised a Jew, you're a Jew for the rest of your life. It's in your bones. I mean, it's cultural. The same thing for many of us for Catholicism. Same things, I'm sure, for Islamics. And so, what's the most abundant element in the world, in the universe? Hydrogen. What percent? 75%, 74%. What's the second most? Helium. 24%. Everything else in the universe, other than hydrogen and helium, is like a rounding error. Okay. So how do we get here? So for the first 400 million years, the universe was so hot it couldn't make atoms. So it was just baryonic material. There no baryonic material. It was all subatomic particles. And then as it expanded and cooled off, it started to form helium and hydrogen. And when the helium and hydrogen gases coalesced into a cloud, gravity pulled them together and they started to form stars. And when stars formed, they had an atomic furnace, and out of the furnace of a star, it started to make the heavier elements. And inside a star, all the elements from hydrogen to iron are formed. But when a star starts to form iron, it starts to die. The amount of energy it takes to process iron into the next heaviest element starts to kill the star. It takes more energy than it creates. In the fusion experience, in fusion before energy is created. So how do we get the rest of the elements? What happens when the star dies? It implodes on itself, and when it implodes on itself, it has an explosion called a supernova. And in that supernova reaction, every other element is made in the universe, and that's us. I mean, when you think of where we came from, 13.5 billion years ago, we had the Big Bang. 4 billion years ago, our solar system was created out of a supernova explosion of some arm in the Milky Way. And then the gas clouds formed, and the debris from that explosion came together and formed the rings, and those rings coalesced into planets. And if our planet was 5% closer or 5% further away from our sun, we couldn't live. I mean, it is the amount of things that, if a Mars-sized planet had not bumped into our planet and created the moon and tilted the Earth at the degree that the Earth is tilted, we wouldn't have an atmosphere. I mean, it is just seconds, what Norm Alpe used to talk about, seconds and inches, And everything we know today about the universe, we only know about 6% of what's there. 75% is dark energy and 25% is dark matter. We don't know what either of those two things are, and according to our calculation, we're missing 94 or 96% of what we need to have our universe be in the order that it is in. So the universe, when it started, and I think it started with what we call God, that's all there was. So when you were a kid and they said God's everywhere, God's all-knowing, it's all there was. And then as the evolution of the planet, the evolution of our universe took place, and we got life, and we just take life for granted. You know, we don't really know what it is. I mean, you can take a person apart cell by cell by cell, and you can't find the soul, you can't find what life really is. I mean, it is in some ways magical. It is of God. And I think elementally, we are comprised of God. I think elementally, we participate in the mind of God. The mind of God is, and the universe is moving towards life, towards love. It is the spreading and the transformation of God. We kind of trained to think that God kind of showed up 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, depending upon what tradition you're in. And that's, you know, that's pretty narrow. What the hell do you think he was doing for 13.5 billion years, you know, before he showed up? I remember asking, I was on a retreat with a bunch of Trappists, and I was saying, what is this stuff about, you know, only Catholics go to heaven? And, you know, are we going to, when the Buddhists die, are we going to make them charcoal briquettes to cook the chicken for the Christian Brother Fellowship in heaven? I mean, and he said, people tend to, Jesus was an historic figure, he said, but the Christ is a universal figure. And who is to say that the Christ was not present for Muhammad, you know, and not present for the Buddha, and not present for the, you know, for all the different traditions? What we have access to is the stuff of the universe. I mean, it is just extraordinary that we get the opportunity to participate. And we are the, we don't look like it, but we are the leading edge of the evolution of the universe. So God must have low standards. But human beings want to personify that God, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm a practicing Catholic, and we do our own thing with that. But we so limit, we so give in the idea of personificating God, as opposed to making it universal, as opposed to making it, because the mind has a hell of a tough time thinking, how is it non-judgmental? How is it just love? You know, because many of us grew up with this idea of a person, you know, that was in charge. And we know what people are like. And so, at any rate, that universality has given me a sense of awe. Today in the world, we don't have many places where we have awe. I know that. Oh, I read that. Yeah, I got, you know, pets, infants. There's something about an infant that inspires awe. There's something about turning the corner and being in front of a mountain that stops you for a moment. There's something about walking through a woods and coming to a glade and an opening in a quiet, special place. And you have this moment of awe. And that moment ends with you being aware of yourself seeing that. So the moments are when we aren't there. That quietude. Some of what we really want and need in this process is quietude. And we are, you know, you look up under alcoholism. Alcoholism, when I came in, was its own disease. Now it's in the diagnostic manual under mental illness, you know, which I don't like. We're neurotics, you know, and we have those destructive patterns of self that, you know, create a lot of mischief. I just am in awe of what came through Bill Wilson, Bob Smith, and the first men in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am so grateful about what they kept, and I'm grateful about what they didn't keep. Had they tried to make, Bill went through instruction to become a Catholic under Bishop Sheen, and thank God he reached the conclusion that that was not what he should do. He said, if I do that, that'll just create one more conflict in Alcoholics Anonymous and create one more religion, and God knows we don't need that. And we have been able to, we are a troubled group of people. What we would have done if this was a religion, and if you regularly attend business meetings, you know what we would have done. It's just, we are the worst people in the world, and we treat each other so poorly when we conduct our business. The General Service Conference, in many ways, is one of the greatest experiences I ever had, and in other ways, it's one of the most disappointing goddamn thing in the world, because they are a much bigger example of what we're experiencing at home in our regional stuff. So there is something in the bigness of it that allows us to be small. And there's something in the smallness of it that allows a sense of humility. The ego, we forget that we are self-contained, and we are just trained to look through our hole in the fence. My hole in the fence was right below the cow's tail. Every once in a while, the cow would move and I'd have a different view. There's thousands of holes in the fence, but I had my chair there, I had my iced tea, I had a little umbrella, and I kept going back to that hole. And you guys brought me to a different hole and gave me a different vision. So our program will bring us to a place where we start to have some sense of that. And I think the sense of that and the sense of smallness, the wonderful sense of, the positive sense of smallness, the power of the humility that Bill talks about so much in Step 7 in the 12 and 12, is freeing. Ego doesn't like it. But the ego has to become a junior partner in our process. And this is what our book and what our practice, this practice is just unbelievable. And as you listened to Jules last night and you listened to us over the weekend, it's the Karate Kid. It's wax on, wax off. You're doing things that you don't know what the result is going to be, and you don't know exactly what it's going to do. And the process of finding God is a process of removal, not addition. So if it's the process of removal, what's left must be pretty good. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to change the essential self. We're simply trying to reduce the ego and get the neurosis out of the way. And we've been given the instructions. So this has been an amazing group to talk to. There is pitching and there is catching. If you are pitching and no one is catching, all the balls end up on the other side of the net. And it doesn't work. This group is, you almost can't tell when the pitching and catching changes, and I thank you for that. It has been an extraordinary weekend. We talked a little bit about relationships, and we've talked a little bit about dads and so forth. I want to make one distinct point. In order for you to be here, they absolutely had to have your mother and your father. If that event was a fraction of a second later, you'd be your brother or sister. It had to be that exact moment. Only those two people could combine to have you be who you are. So we get all mixed up in some of the way we were raised and some of the way it was go. And the universe has conspired for 13.5 billion years for the last coupling of the last thousands of years, a successful coupling of your ancestors, to bring it to the spot where sometime in March or whatever it was of 1943, my parents had me. But you couldn't have a different father. You couldn't have a different mother. The gift of life and the gift of the specialness of who you are. We have a great similarity, but we have a great individuality. And that individuality and the gift of life came from your father. And that's what the universe and God put in place for you, for me to be here. And that's kind of like Ebby. Ebby was such an imperfect person. And yet Bill called him his sponsor all his life. Today, I think we would have fired Ebby. You know, but Bill didn't fire him. And Bill took care of him all the way to the end. And I love the way we take care of each other. Thank you.
Jack, alcoholic. Joe, thank you. You know, we never know what we're going to get into with these things. And we got here, and Joe came up to me and asked me how my room was. You know, how was the surprise this time? And it's been beautiful and perfect. So thank you. This place is amazing. And thank you for making Kenny your AA wife. Kenny, thank you. And all the guys that had anything to do with this, thank you. I want an AA wife like Kenny. Yeah. That's good. And, you know, the conversation that was started here this morning, my son's an engineer, and we were up, a buddy of mine died in sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, and we went up at an archery shoot, and we hopped in the truck to go to the memorial service, and we're driving down the hill to go to the service, and my son was good friend of the guys that died as well, and because we were just part of the family. And we're driving down the hill, and we're talking about God. And there was a time where Bob would have given that talk, I wouldn't have known what to say afterwards. And we're driving down the hill, and we're talking about God. And I said, what do you believe? What do you believe? You know, and I just asked him. And he said, Dad, I don't know what I believe. He said, but hanging around Alcoholics Anonymous, I've found out that I don't need to know what I believe. What a freedom.
Wow.
What a freedom. You know, and that, because everywhere you go in those religions that Bob was talking about, they tell you what to believe. This is what we do here, you know. It's Jesus Christ, or it's Buddha, or it's whatever it is. And the greatest freedom in Alcoholics Anonymous is we don't care what you believe. We care that you believe. We care that you have an experience with it. You know, and the way I got an experience with what my current belief system tells me is by doing this work. You know, I was all mixed up when I got here. I had no idea. You know, I knew what I didn't like. I could tell you that, no problem. You know, but what did I really believe? What did I really think? What did I really have faith in? And the journey through the steps, it brought me to a place where I understand it. Can't tell you what it is, so I just tell you my story. I can remember hearing Bob sometime in the last few years. He wasn't talking to me, he was just sharing in a group. And he said that, and he may correct me later, but I don't care. I look forward to it. But he said that he had a new experience with the integrity of our story. And he used the word integrity. And that's what we do here. There's an integrity in me telling you my story that is unequaled. I don't think there's anything more powerful than a man sitting down and telling me their story. You know, and we're storytellers. You know, that's what we do. The two people that swept up me and my wife and breathed life into us. They brought us into their story. They made a spot at the table for us. They showed us what it looked like to do this stuff everywhere they went. There was no areas in their life where it wasn't present, which was stunning to me. I remember sitting down the first time I went down to Texas, and there's probably, I don't know, 20 of us. We sit down in this little cafeteria, and we're going to have lunch. And everybody sits down, and Don says, let's join hands and pray. I'm thinking, we're in public. And they would pray before they broke bread together. And in the beginning, it made me uncomfortable. I didn't like it, you know. And the funny thing is I did it enough that I wanted to be that guy that would ask people to join hands and pray. That's what happens here. Something that's just stunningly unbelievable becomes who you want to be. It comes from that thing that Bob was talking about, that integrity of our story. You know, the most undeniable thing in this room is where we came from. You know, we walk in here broken. We walk in here just wounded, desperate, no idea how to fix it. And if you come all the way in and sit all the way down and stay here, you will be healed, whether you like it or not. It's what's on the table here, you know. And you know, but I'll get into something going on in my life, and I start making different decisions. You know, I'm going fishing. You heard my story. There's nothing wrong with fishing. But when I start putting it in front of this, when it becomes the thing that is my current worship, when it's the thing I can't get off my mind, when it's the thing that's telling me I'm missing out, you know, it's tough. You know, whatever it is, you know. And we have this practical, pragmatic program of action that brings me back to God. It brings me back to you first, generally. And then it brings me back to God, you know. And the journey here, I was, you know, we talk about, we're going to talk about 10, 11, and 12. And Bob talked about relationships. 10, 11, and 12 encompass every relationship in my life. The relationship with me, the relationship with you, and the relationship with God. That's really what these steps bring us to. You know, how do I stay unblocked? How do I stay and become a hollow bone? That place where it's flowing through me, not from me. You know, when it's from me, it's ugly, man. And these steps, this program, take us to that place. You know, it's my son will be the guy that's sitting in my truck saying, because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't need to know. Yet he's got a God. And that's the same son that will tell me to fuck off, and I'll tell him to fuck off. You know, but then we come back together. You know, just because we become, you know, soldiers on this spiritual journey, doesn't exempt us from life. You know, I've gone through some tough stuff in recovery. You know, life's in session, and for the first time ever, I'm showing up and I'm being present, and it's not always comfortable. You know, I can remember asking Maloney one day, you know, everything is on me. You know, it's just, and I can feel it. And I said, what are people doing with their feelings in Alcoholics Anonymous? It's like, it's just on me. I knew what to do with them before I got here. And he said to me, Jack, in Alcoholics Anonymous, what we do with feelings is we feel them. That sucks some days. And other days it's magnificent and I want it to last forever. And I'll throw everything I've got at making it last forever. You know, it's that this too shall pass. I was reading a piece of spiritual literature yesterday, and there was a poem in there, and every stanza ended with this shall pass. Whether it was good or bad, it ended with this shall pass. You know, it took me a long time to understand what it said in the 10th step. You know, I was the guy where if you rolled into my home group and the 10th step was the topic, I'd talk to you about how at night I would consider my day and I would make amends quickly. That's not what it says. You know, it's continuous. It's all day long. It's the walk around step. It's how am I doing right now? You know, my ego wants me to look out there, wants me to look at you. My ego loves me comparing myself to you. My ego loves comparing you to me, you know, and what the 10th step tells me is, look at Jack. How am I doing? Where's selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear cropping up in my life? That's my job in the 10th step, is to watch Jack. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I think it's the least followed direction in the big book. For me, it was the least followed direction in the big book. And when I see these things crop up, because I can see them today, you know, and it's like, I know that you guys are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're in one of those intense moments of fellowship with your wife or your partner, and you're thinking to yourself, don't say it. You ever been there? Yeah, don't say it. Don't say it. And you say it. And it just escalates shit, you know? And after you say it, you think to yourself, I knew I shouldn't have said it. And now I got to live with the consequences of my actions. And what I can tell you is if we incorporate this into our life where we're paying attention to who and what we are on a continuous basis, there'll be a time where you're standing in that same moment of intense fellowship and you think to yourself, don't say it. And you don't say it. And it de-escalates. And you come together quicker. And then after a while, the thought doesn't even come up to say it. Because I'm learning to watch for these things. I've got more skin in the game. I've seen the result in my own life. I've watched the transformation. There's 4 spots in our literature that talk about the change of heart. I change my mind like the weather. Good or bad, I change my mind like the weather. You know, I still do today. You know, I'll get a good idea, man, and watch out. We're all going down that road. And when you change my heart, it changes who I be. It changes the substance of who I am. I'm not the same guy that I was a moment before because my heart has been changed. This is the stuff that changes our heart. You know, through experience, through understanding, through love. It changes my heart. But you know, when I see dishonesty crop up, Am I following the directions? Am I asking God to remove it? You know, when something comes up for you, what do you do? It says that I'm supposed to call someone, supposed to pray about it, supposed to make amends quickly if they're due, and I'm supposed to direct my attention to someone I can help. Simple, right? I think it's the least followed direction in the book. It took me a long time before my heart was changed enough for me to do that instinctually because of who I be. And today I can tell you that that happens mostly. I still get in the moments, and I end up back doing these things, calling Bob and telling him my son just told me to fuck off, and by the way, I told him to fuck off too. Maybe I said it first. But he deserved it. That's the story of my life. You know, one more time I said it, you know, to my wife. And I'm on the phone. I'm asking God to relieve me of that. You know, and it says in here, love and tolerance of others is our code. And I'm sitting in my house talking to some guy on the phone. My son's home from engineering school, and he's kicking around the kitchen, and I'm on the phone with somebody, and I'm telling him that you know, tolerance is tough. I'm telling the guy I sponsor on the phone that tolerance is tough. You know, I feel like I should get extra credit for it. It takes muscle, man. Spiritual muscle. And I hang up the phone from talking to the guy. My son from the kitchen says, "Dad, that's not tolerance." And I'm thinking to myself, who are you to question my spiritual juice? And I said to him, "What's tolerance?" He said, "Dad, tolerance is the space between two objects that allows them to operate freely without friction." I said, "Fuck you."
I love that definition.
I love that definition too.
Say it again.
The space between two objects to allow them to operate freely without friction. Little engineer bastard. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck because I knew it was true. You know, it's those things that Bob talks about that when we hear it, we know it's true. We don't need any further authentication. We just know in our heart that what we just learned, we've always known. And it's true. You know, you get to be you and I get to be me here. First place I've ever been where I felt that way. You know, I get to just be Jack. And all that comes with that. And it's through this process. You know, doesn't that seem, when you think about that, love and tolerance of others is our code. It's our code. We only have one code. It must be pretty important. And then it goes on to talk about the position of neutrality, safe and protected. How'd you like to live there? Sounds a lot like love and tolerance. You know, I don't care what you guys are doing. You know, I get to be me here. I get to bring what I bring to the party. And it's the magic. It's the first time in my life I'm not trying to be someone else. And it's promised to us here. It says the problem will be removed, will be placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I was down, a buddy of mine pulled a private permit to float the Grand Canyon and called me and asked me if I wanted to go because he knew I could row a boat. And I went with him, and we're 6-7 days on the river, and we pull into this place called Nankoweap. And when you pull into Nankoweap, the canyon gets wider, and there's ancient ruins of homes, you know, up in the cliffs. And it's just a magnificent spot. And I'm sitting out on a boulder praying and meditating, you know, doing what you guys taught me to do in the morning and watching the light show. Because when the sun comes up in the canyon, it just lights up the whole wall. And it is a show. And I'm smoking a cigar and I'm doing my thing and watching the light show. And I take the cigar and I put it out on the boulder and I field strip it and I put everything in my pocket because it's pristine. You know, I can feel it. It's tactile. I don't want to mess it up. And I get up from the boulder and to go back to camp, and there's a big black ash mark on the side of the boulder. And I'm like, oh, shit. And I went down to the river, and I got water, and I got sand, and I'm washing a boulder in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, trying to get the ash mark off of it. And the epiphany for me was that everywhere I go, I leave a mark. It doesn't matter what condition I'm in. Everywhere I go, I leave a mark. Sometimes it's a good mark, sometimes it's a bad mark. But everywhere I go, I leave a mark. And this practice, these disciplines that we're talking about, this relationship with God allows me to leave the best mark possible everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, if I incorporate these things into who I be, I leave the best mark possible everywhere I go. You know, the 11th step, I'm going to tell you a story about that guided meditation this morning. Bob shared with me that he was doing the meditation, and what he said to me, he said, you know, Jack, I've been doing this meditation, and it's great. It's like I got a new dick. It's a spiritual conversation.
That's not a direct quote.
Yes, it is. Actually, I think he said it'd be like you get a new dick. So I think, man, I'm going to do it. So I get on the Insight Timer. He told me what it was, and I get on the Insight Timer, and I download the app. I download the meditation, and I'm sitting in my office chair, and it goes through the meditation. And if you noticed at the end of the meditation, if you got your ass out of bed this morning, it says at the end, now you have 55 days left. And, you know, I missed the next day because I'm committed to it. And third day, I get back on there, and I go through the whole thing, and I'm sitting there and waiting for the new dick. And, and it says you have 55 days left. And I'm thinking to myself, shit, it knows I missed a day. So the next morning I wake up and I run through it, you know, and get to the end of the meditation. It says, you have 55 days left. I'm like, what the fuck? So I go on the Insight Timer, and I'm trying to find day 54. And I can't find it. So I email Insight Timer. I'm like, where's day 54? She says, there is no day 54. I said, yeah, there's got to be a day 54. And she said, no, there isn't one. And so that was the response I got back in the email was there is no day 54, that's it. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't make any sense. So I look up the phone number to Insight Timer. And I call Insight Timer. And the lady gets on the phone, and I explained the situation to her. I told her I'm looking for day 54 and the countdown, and I want credit, man. And she explains to me that there is no day 54. This is it. And yes, it says day 55. Tough luck. That's what we've got. And I'm arguing with her at this point. So that's who your speaker is this morning. And then, you know, I followed through with it. You know, it took me a little bit, and I followed through with it, and it was an incredible experience. I haven't done it for 6 years like Bob has, but I followed through with the 56 days, and it was a really good experience. And that's been my journey with prayer and meditation. You know, I find something, I try it, I see if it works. But it's like Tim was saying when he did the meditation the day before, we were talking about him doing it, and I said, wouldn't it be funny? You know, we go to all these things, these conferences, and there's always meditation. I said, wouldn't it be funny if somebody just got up in front of everybody and sat down and got quiet and didn't say anything? That's how I meditate. There's no formality to it anymore. For a long time, there was a formality to it. When I can remember Maloney coming to me and saying, "What's your morning practice like?" I said, "Well, I'm really busy in the morning, Don. I'm a builder, and I got to get up early, and I got to be on the sites." And he knew all that. He said, "What I want you to do is I want to sit." He said to me, he said, "When you put your dogs out in the morning, I want you to sit down." Actually, he said to me, "What happens if you don't put your dogs out in the morning?" I said, "Well, they shit on the floor." He said, "Well, that's what not praying and meditating in the morning is like. You're shitting on your day." And he said, "I want you to sit down read something spiritual. I don't care what it is. I don't care how much it is, but I want you to read something spiritual, and I want you to spend 2 minutes in your chair." And I did it, and the first day I did it, I look at my watch. It's been 30 seconds. Now it's been 2 minutes. It's 10 seconds later. It felt like forever. It was uncomfortable. The reality is that I just started doing it because he told me to do it. And I'm that way. I want to check the box. I want to be able to go tell Don I did it. So I did it. One day I was sitting there and I got done doing what I was doing, and it had been 15 minutes. And I was stunned. And I had enjoyed it. I had a sense of peace. And then the next day, I was back to 3 minutes, but then the next day it went for 20 minutes. And, now I don't know, it's still not formal. I'm that guy. I get up in the morning, I generally read something, and I sit in my chair. I don't take the time to get my feet firmly planted on the ground. I don't try and, I just sit there, and I get quiet. And there's a gift in quiet. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. I used to, I know there's other guys in here that have had the same experience as me. But I thought I had to be quiet to get quiet. My mind's doing 1,000,000 miles an hour. And it interrupted a practice because I thought that I should have a quiet mind in order to meditate. It's not even what the directions in the book say. They say we have some definite and valuable suggestions. It says, upon awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. Can you think about the 24 hours ahead with a quiet mind? No. It gives us permission. It says, think about it. Think about what's going on today. That'd be remarkable if we could get it down to just thinking about today. So it knows Bill knew already that I don't have a quiet mind. Think about it. What are you going to do today? How are you going to show up today? And then ask God to be with you. Ask God to divorce myself, from selfishness, self-pity, dishonest thinking. And when I do those things, my day starts better. And my meditation goes better, because it's giving myself the license to just show up how I am. Alcoholics Anonymous meets us right where we are. And when I use the word Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm talking about God. God meets us right where we are, every single time. That buddy of mine that was... that my son and I were going down to the funeral for. His name was Bobby, and Bobby and I are going turkey hunting. And Bobby said, "Pick me up at 5:30. We'll go here and we'll hunt." And I showed up at his house at 5:30 in the morning, and he's not ready to go. And if you want to piss me off, don't be ready to go when we're going hunting. And I'm irritated, and I look in at his door when I walk up because he didn't come out, and he's got a fire going, and he's drinking a cup of coffee. So now I'm really pissed off. And he opens the door, and I go in, and we started talking. I said, "We were supposed to take off," and he said, "Yeah, whatever." And we're talking, and I'm trying to rush him, and he says, "Jack, you just want to go seize the day, don't you?" Well, I said, yes, Bobby, I want to go seize the day. We're supposed to be up on the hill by sunup. And he said, Jack, what I want you to do is I want you to sit down right here and we're going to have a cup of coffee and we're going to read from this book, one of those books that Tim was talking about that makes us late to go everywhere. And he said we're going to say a prayer and then we're going to join the day. This practice that it outlines here, the evening review, the pawn awakening, continuing throughout the day, looking to God for the intuitive thought or action, coming to rely upon that, takes me to where I can join the day. It's God's day. You know, it was doing just fine without me. What am I going to add to it? You know? And from that place, everything changes. You know, I don't need to go seize the day. You know, but I do need to join the day. And just those little things that happen to us on this journey, that all of a sudden the light came on where there was no light before. I couldn't get there. But if we stick around here long enough and we continue to do these things and we have an experience, and the experience will change our lives. The 12th step is a result. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, you become this. And that's my experience. You know, and I brought it up a little bit earlier when we were talking about living amends. You want to do living amends? Do the 12th step. Have the awakening. Have the result. Practice the principles in all your affairs. When I said I was going to do a living amends, it meant I was going to be nice. I was going to show up when I was supposed to show up. You know, I was going to take responsibility for my life where I was supposed to take responsibility for my life. I could be compassionate. I could show up for people and cry with them. That's what a living amends looks like, right? That's step 12. And it's a result of doing all the other work. And I'm the guy that would work the promises hoping the steps come true. And I'm serious. You know, and the reality is you work the steps and that's the result. You know, I can become a guy that has an interest in these things and I have some experience with these things. And it's all good.
Sometimes you wonder when you hear someone like Jack or myself or Jules talk, you know, could I do that? Do I have what it takes to go do that? In the time that Jack was talking, probably 10 billion red blood cells were torn apart and remade. You have 54 trillion cells in your body. And every one of those almost every one of them is replaced in a 7-year period of time. You want to be new? You want to change? Every cell in your body, you are as new as it gets. It is the machine, the mind. It is extraordinary. And yet I struggle with my neurosis. What's my neurosis? Mostly my neurosis is, what do you like, Bob? I'd like more. Bob, it's all you can eat for $2. I want $4 worth. Bob, you don't need $4 worth. You know what the opposite of more is? Enough. Enough. Interesting. I have a spiritual practice. It's become moderately excessive in my old age and time. But it is just extraordinary how it allows me to start my day with the meditation, with my readings. I read 30 meditation books a day. It takes about 35, 40 minutes. And then I go to a meeting from 7 to 8. I want to read the promises after step 10. I don't think they just relate to step 10. Sometimes I think we get overwhelmed when Jack talks about or I talk about the instructions in the book and what the book says and what, all the 12-step work, all the stuff. And it says, "We have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, for by this time sanity will have returned." The promise of step 2, the completion. Sanity will have returned. We'll seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil as if from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally. We find that this has happened automatically. Does that sound like I'm doing it? We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given to us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Does that sound like I'm doing that? It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor afraid. That's our experience. So long as we keep in fit spiritual condition, we're not cured. We're granted a spiritual reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. It is beyond thought. It is beyond us. It is not hard. It is actually easier than what we've been doing. If we keep coming, if we keep participating, if we keep just doing the best you know how to do. I mean, Jack and I have been talking, for 7 or 8 hours doing this. And you listened to Jules last night in the bare, powerful simplicity of going through the 10 steps. I mean, it is, from A to Z. And most people would just give their right arm if they understood the unfair advantage of having an outline for living that this book gives us. It is just a gift that is absolutely extraordinary, and for most of us, we got it because we burnt our life to the ground, or for whatever reason, we were cracked open enough for the first time to go to meetings, to get a sponsor, maybe to get into the book, and we did that slowly and reluctantly. Were we supposed to stop pretty quick? This has been a great weekend for me. I love you guys, and I love my experience this weekend. I like Jack even. Thank you.